I'm Penelope Edwards, 30, and literally last weekend, my attempt to bridge the gap with my family? Yeah, it totally backfired. The love I'd poured my heart into building with Jake, the man who makes me feel seen, it blew up into a full-on family meltdown at our so-called happy reunion. My parents, obsessed with status and their perfect image, straight up demanded I ditch Jake because he's just a plumber. When I clapped back, defending the man I love, the room went dead silent. "You're choosing him over us?" my mother hissed, her eyes like daggers, with my sister smirking and the cousins awkwardly staring at their plates. But here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me. It lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note. This story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now, back to the story. The reunion was at my parents' sprawling estate, all marble floors and chandeliers that scream old money. I'd driven up in my modest sedan, nerves jangling like loose change in my pocket. Jake wanted to come, but I'd convinced him to stay home. His steady hands and kind eyes didn't deserve the snobbery waiting inside. The air was thick with the scent of my mother's signature roast lamb, but the warmth ended there. I adjusted my scarf, a nervous tick, as I stepped into the dining room. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his Rolex glinting as he swirled his wine. My mother, Eleanor, was fussing over my younger sister, Sophia, who was regaling everyone with her latest charity gala triumph. "Penelope, you're late," my mother said without looking up. Her voice clipped like she was scolding a child. I slid into my seat, already feeling like I was auditioning for a role I'd never get. Sophia, 27 and polished like a magazine cover, flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, Penny, still, what is it you do again?" she asked, her tone dripping with faux curiosity. The cousins chuckled and I felt my cheeks burn. "I work in nonprofit fundraising, pouring my soul into causes that matter, but, to them, it's invisible unless it's splashed across a society page." I mumbled something about a recent campaign, but my father cut me off. "Let's talk about something interesting," he said, turning to Sophia. "Tell us about that senator you met." The table erupted in oohs and ahs, and I sank lower in my chair, my fingers twisting the napkin in my lap. Then it happened, the moment that cracked everything open. My mother, her pearls gleaming under the chandelier, leaned forward. "Penelope, we need to discuss this plumber of yours." The word landed like a slap. My heart thudded. I'd mentioned Jake casually before, but this was different. "He's not good enough," she continued, her lips pursing as if she'd tasted something sour. "You're an Edwards. You can't throw your life away on someone like that." My father nodded, his jaw tight. Sophia raised an eyebrow, sipping her wine like she was watching a show. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles whitening. "Jake is kind, brilliant, and he loves me," I said, my voice shaking but firm. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's eyes narrowed. "You're embarrassing us," she snapped. "Choose him, and you're choosing to be nothing." I stood, my chair scraping the floor, my pulse hammering in my ears. "I choose him," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. The room froze. My father's face darkened, and Sophia let out a little gasp, more theatrical than genuine. I turned and walked out, my heels clicking on the marble, their stunned silence trailing me like a shadow. In that moment, I wasn't just leaving the room, I was leaving their world. And deep down I knew I was carrying a secret that would make them regret every word. As I drove away from the estate that night, the headlights cutting through the darkness like accusations, my mind raced back to all the times I'd felt this invisible, this undervalued. It wasn't new, it was a pattern etched into my bones from childhood. But one memory hit hardest right then, the night of my college graduation, when I'd finally thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see me. I'd worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, no trust fund cushion like Sophia had, and I'd graduated summa cum laude in social work with a thesis on community rebuilding that got published in a journal. I remember clutching that diploma backstage, my cap tassel swinging as I paced, heart pounding with hope. This was it. Proof I was more than the quiet daughter who didn't sparkle at parties. The ceremony was in the university auditorium, rows of folding chairs filled with proud families. When my name was called, I walked across the stage, the applause polite but distant. My hands shook as I accepted the scroll, glancing out to where my parents sat. My father checking his watch, my mother whispering to Sophia about her upcoming debutante ball. No cheers from them, no standing ovation like I'd seen other parents give. Afterward, in the lobby buzzing with hugs and photos, I approached them, my gown swishing against my legs. "Mom, Dad, I did it," I said, holding up the diploma, my voice brighter than I felt. My mother glanced at it, her eyebrows arching slightly. "That's nice, dear," she replied, her fingers adjusting her pearl necklace, a habitual fidget when she was disinterested. "But Sophia just got accepted into that exclusive sorority. Isn't that wonderful?" She turned to my sister, beaming, her hand patting Sophia's arm like she'd won the lottery. Sophia, only a freshman then, preened under the attention, her cheeks flushing as she launched into details about the initiation party. "They said I'm a natural fit," she gushed, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. My father nodded approvingly, his hand clapping Sophia's shoulder. "That's my girl, making connections that matter." I stood there, the diploma growing heavy in my grip, my smile faltering as the crowd swirled around us. I shifted my weight, hoping for a redirect, maybe a question about my thesis, or the late nights I'd spent researching. But nothing. My mother's eyes flicked back to me briefly. "You should think about something more prestigious next time, Penelope. Social work is sweet, but it's not exactly building an empire." Her words landed like a casual dismissal, but they stung, making my throat tighten. I swallowed hard, forcing a nod, my fingers creasing the edge of the diploma. As families posed for pictures nearby, flashes popping like fireworks, I excused myself to the bathroom, the door clicking shut behind me. In the mirror, my reflection stared back. Eyes glassy, cap askew. I leaned on the sink, the cool porcelain grounding me as tears threatened. Why did my achievements always fade next to Sophia's? She'd charm a room, land invitations to elite events, and suddenly, that was the gold standard. My work helping underprivileged kids? It was admirable, but never celebrated. I splashed water on my face, the droplets tracing paths down my cheeks, mingling with the ones I couldn't hold back. Wiping them away, I straightened my gown, whispering to myself, "You're enough." But deep down, doubt crept in, like shadows lengthening at dusk. Back in the lobby, the moment had passed. My parents were already discussing dinner reservations at some upscale spot to toast Sophia's news. "Come on, Penelope," my father said, waving me over without a second glance at my accomplishment. We piled into the car, the leather seats creaking as I slid in the back, the diploma tucked under my arm like an afterthought. Conversation flowed around Sophia's future, her potential internships, the influential people she'd meet. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring, my chest aching with that familiar hollowness. That night solidified it. No matter what I did, unless it fit their mold of success, flashy, connected, status-boosting, it didn't count. I'd poured everything into that degree, sacrificed weekends and sleep, only to be overshadowed by my sister's effortless glide through their world. Years later, driving home from the reunion, that memory replayed like a loop, fueling the spark they'd ignited. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, nails digging into the leather. Jake was waiting at home, his truck parked in the driveway, a beacon of real warmth. But as I pulled in, I realized this invisibility had shaped me, pushed me to build something genuine, away from their gaze. And soon, they'd see just how brightly I could shine without them. Pulling into the driveway that night, the engine ticking as it cooled, I sat there for a minute, staring at the porch light Jake had left on for me. It was such a small thing, but it pierced through the fog of my family's dismissal like a promise. I grabbed my purse, the strap slipping through my fingers twice before I got a grip, and headed inside. The door creaked open to the smell of fresh coffee, Jake's way of saying he was there, ready to listen. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, wiping down the counter with a dish towel, his broad shoulders tense like he could sense my mood from the driveway. "Rough night?" he asked, turning with that soft smile that always crinkled the corners of his eyes. I nodded, dropping my keys on the table with a clatter, and sank into a chair, my elbows resting on the wood as I buried my face in my hands. It all started 2 years ago, that aha moment when I met him, though back then I didn't know it would become my secret weapon against their judgment. I was at a community center fundraiser I'd organized. Nothing glamorous, just folding tables laden with donated baked goods and flyers about affordable housing initiatives. My hands were sticky from arranging cookies, and I was wiping them on my jeans when the plumbing burst in the back room. Water gushed everywhere, soaking boxes of supplies, and panic rippled through the volunteers. I rushed over, sloshing through puddles, grabbing buckets from the closet, my sneakers squeaking on the wet tile. That's when Jake arrived, toolbox in hand, called in by the center's manager. He was in work boots and a faded flannel, hair tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed, but his movements were precise, kneeling down, assessing the pipe with a flashlight clenched between his teeth. "Got this," he muttered, his voice calm amid the chaos. I handed him a wrench, our fingers brushing, and for a second the frenzy faded. He fixed it in under 20 minutes, twisting valves with steady hands, water dripping from his brow as he stood back to test the flow. "All good," he said, wiping his forehead with the back of his arm, flashing a grin that made my stomach flip. We chatted while he packed up, about the fundraiser, my work in nonprofits, his days unclogging drains for folks who couldn't afford big repairs. His laugh was genuine, deep and rumbling as he shared a story about a kid who'd helped him by handing tools upside down. I found myself lingering, folding a stray napkin just to stay near him, the air between us buzzing with something real. That night, he asked for my number, scribbling it on a scrap of receipt paper from his pocket, his handwriting neat despite the calluses on his fingers. Our first date was simple, a walk in the park, coffee in paper cups, sitting on a bench watching ducks paddle in the pond. He listened when I talked about my family, how their world of galas and deals left me feeling like a footnote. "Sounds tough," he said, his hand covering mine, warm and reassuring, no judgment in his eyes. I squeezed back, tracing the lines on his palm with my thumb, feeling seen for the first time in years. As weeks turned to months, our bond deepened through little moments, him showing up with takeout after my long days, me helping him sort invoices in his tiny office above the garage. We'd cook together, his knife chopping onions with rhythmic precision while I stirred the pot, steam rising between us as we talked dreams, mine for bigger impact in my work, his for... Well, he was vague about that, always steering back to the present. But the struggle hit when I realized keeping him from my family meant hiding parts of myself. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I came home to find him tinkering with a gadget on the kitchen table. Not plumbing tools, but circuit boards and wires. "What's this?" I asked, picking up a small device, its lights blinking as I turned it over. He hesitated, his fingers pausing mid-solder, then set down the iron with a soft click. "Side project," he said casually, but his eyes darted away, avoiding mine. I pressed, sitting across from him, my foot nudging his under the table. That's when he confessed, his voice dropping low, like he was sharing a vulnerability. "I'm not just a plumber, Pen." He reached for his laptop, fingers tapping keys hesitantly, pulling up a website for a tech startup. His tech startup. My breath caught as I scrolled. MIT grad in engineering, CEO of a company revolutionizing smart home systems, disguised as everyday plumbing tech. "Why hide it?" I whispered, my hand trembling on the mouse. He leaned back, rubbing his neck, the chair creaking. "Grew up poor, worked my way through school fixing pipes. Started the company quietly, didn't want the spotlight, the expectations. Being just Jake the plumber lets me stay grounded." His success was massive, millions in funding, patents pending, but anonymous, funneled through shell names. I stared at the screen, the glow reflecting in my widening eyes, a rush of awe mixing with the weight of secrecy. "Promise you'll keep it quiet?" he asked, his hand finding mine again, thumb stroking my knuckles. I nodded, pulling him into a hug, his shirt smelling of solder and coffee, but inside turmoil brewed. This was gold against my family's snobbery, yet revealing it felt like cheating, winning on their terms, not mine. The intense struggle was internal, nights lying awake beside him, his steady breathing a contrast to my racing thoughts. I'd trace patterns on the ceiling with my eyes, fingers clenching the sheets, wrestling with the urge to shout it from rooftops versus protecting his privacy. Dates became laced with caution, avoiding fancy spots where someone might recognize him from tech circles. Once, at a casual diner, he got a call from an investor. He stepped outside, pacing the parking lot, his free hand gesturing animatedly. I watched through the window, sipping lukewarm coffee, my fork pushing eggs around the plate, heart swelling with pride but twisted by the lie we lived. Building this relationship meant constant vigilance, like balancing on a wire, his hidden empire growing, our love deepening, but always shadowed by my family's potential disdain. Yet, the eventual success of our secret felt like a quiet triumph. His company hit a milestone, a major contract with a national chain, celebrated in our living room with cheap champagne, bubbles fizzing as we toasted on the couch, my head on his shoulder. "We're in this together," he said, clinking glasses, his arm around me warm and solid. I kissed him, tasting victory, knowing this hidden world was ours. It armored me against the invisibility, a private glow that no dismissal could dim. As I lay there that night after the reunion, Jake pulling me close, his heartbeat steady under my ear, I realized this secret wasn't just his. It was our fortress, waiting for the right moment to reveal. That night faded into a restless sleep. Jake's arm draped over me like an anchor, but by morning, the weight of it all lingered. Months slipped by after the reunion, quiet ones where we built our life in the shadows of their disapproval. My work at the nonprofit humming along with small wins, like securing a grant for a youth program that had me fist-pumping alone in my office. But now here we were, on the eve of the annual family dinner, the one my parents insisted on every year to parade their successes and measure ours against them. I stood in our bedroom, the closet door ajar, rifling through hangers that clinked softly against each other, pulling out dresses I'd worn before, each one a reminder of past judgments. My fingers paused on a simple navy sheath, the fabric cool and smooth under my touch, but I yanked it off the hanger with a sharp tug, holding it up to the mirror where my reflection stared back, eyes shadowed with dread. Jake was in the living room, his laptop open on the coffee table, the screen's glow casting blue light on his face as he typed furiously. I wandered in, the dress draped over my arm like a flag of surrender, and sank onto the couch beside him, my knee brushing his. He glanced up, his fingers hovering over the keys, and set the laptop aside with a soft click, turning to face me fully. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice low and steady, reaching out to tuck a stray hair behind my ear, his thumb lingering on my cheek. I leaned into it for a second, closing my eyes, but the knot in my stomach twisted tighter. "The dinner tomorrow," I murmured, opening my eyes to meet his, the warmth in them clashing with the chill I felt. "I have to go, but inviting them to the wedding, it's going to be a battlefield." My hand fidgeted with the dress hem, rolling the fabric between my fingers, the threads pulling slightly under the pressure. He nodded, his jaw tightening just a fraction, a micro-twitch I knew meant he was holding back his own frustration. "We don't need their approval, Pen," he said, his hand dropping to mine, interlacing our fingers with a gentle squeeze. But then his expression shifted, a spark lighting his eyes as he straightened up, his free hand gesturing toward the laptop. "Actually, something big happened today. Might change how you feel about walking in." I tilted my head, curiosity cutting through the anxiety, my grip on his hand loosening as I leaned forward. "The deal?" he continued, his voice gaining energy. "With that venture firm? It's on the verge. They called this afternoon, said the contracts are ready to sign next week. If it goes through, the company's valuation shoots up. We're talking game-changing, enough to expand globally." His words hung in the air and I watched his face, the way his lips curved into a rare, excited smile, his shoulders relaxing as if saying it aloud made it real. I blinked, processing, my heart skipping a beat. Jake's tech firm, still hidden behind his plumber facade, had been grinding toward this for months. Late nights where I'd bring him coffee, watching him diagram algorithms on napkins, his pen scratching furiously while I rubbed his tense back. "That's incredible," I whispered, a genuine smile breaking through, my fingers tightening around his again. But the high was short-lived. Reality crashed back as I glanced at the dress, folding it over the armrest with deliberate creases. "But tomorrow at the dinner, when I tell them about the engagement, about the wedding plans, they'll just see you as the plumber, not the MIT genius CEO closing million-dollar deals." My voice cracked on the last word, and I pulled my hand away to rub my temples, elbows digging into my knees, the couch cushions sinking under the shift. Jake scooted closer, his arm wrapping around my shoulders, pulling me against his side. The scent of his aftershave, clean and woodsy, grounding me. "Let them," he said softly, his chin resting on my head for a moment before he pulled back to look me in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "This deal isn't for them, it's for us. Imagine walking in there knowing that, even if they don't." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on my arm, a soothing rhythm that eased the pounding in my chest. I nodded slowly, but doubt gnawed at me, my foot tapping, an erratic beat on the rug. What if they refused to come to the wedding, cut me off for good? The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, my eyes stinging as I avoided his by staring at the laptop screen, where an email draft sat open, full of technical jargon that screamed success. He sighed, a deep exhale that ruffled my hair, and cupped my chin gently, tilting my face up. "Then we build our own family, our way, but hey, if it helps, picture their faces when they eventually find out." A mischievous glint crossed his eyes, and I couldn't help a small laugh, short and breathy, my hand covering his on my chin. We sat like that, the silence stretching, broken only by the tick of the wall clock, each second amplifying the tension of tomorrow. I finally stood, picking up the dress, smoothing it out with palms that still trembled slightly. "I need to iron this," I said, more to myself, heading to the laundry room where the ironing board waited, unfolded from earlier. As I plugged in the iron, the cord snaking across the floor, steam hissing as I pressed the fabric, each stroke flattening wrinkles, but not the unease in my gut. Jake followed, leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with that patient expression. "You're stronger than them, Pen, remember that." His words wrapped around me like a hug, and I set the iron down with a clunk, turning to him, stepping into his embrace. We held each other, my cheek against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady, like always. But as the evening wore on, the conversation echoing in my mind, I knew the dinner loomed like a storm cloud, ready to unleash. Jake's deal was our hidden ace, but facing them meant bracing for the lightning strike of their prejudice, one that might force the revelation sooner than planned. The next evening arrived too soon, the sun dipping low as I pulled up to my parents' estate once more, the gravel crunching under my tires like a warning. I smoothed my hands over the navy dress I'd ironed meticulously, the fabric now clinging slightly from the humid drive, and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes determined, but lips pressed thin with resolve. Jake had kissed me goodbye at the door, his hands framing my face, whispering, "You've got this," his breath warm against my skin. I nodded, but as I stepped out of the car, heels sinking into the path, the knot in my stomach reformed tighter than before. The front door loomed, brass knocker gleaming, and I lifted my hand to it, knuckles rapping twice, the sound echoing in the quiet dusk. My mother opened the door, her silk blouse impeccable, a strand of pearls catching the hall light as she leaned in for an air kiss that barely grazed my cheek. "Penelope, darling," she said, her voice laced with that practiced politeness, stepping back to appraise me head to toe, her eyes lingering on my simple earrings, a subtle flicker of disapproval. "You look comfortable." The word hung there, a backhanded jab disguised as a compliment, and I felt my shoulders tense, fingers curling into my palms as I followed her inside. The foyer smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers, vases brimming with lilies that made my nose twitch. Sophia was already there, perched on the arm of a velvet chair, scrolling her phone, her manicured nails tapping the screen rhythmically. She looked up, flashing a smile that showed too many teeth. "Penny? Finally!" she exclaimed, standing to hug me loosely, her perfume overwhelming, a cloud of vanilla that clung as she pulled away. "We were starting to think you'd bail again." I forced a smile, my lips stretching tight, and set my purse on the side table with a soft thud, the zipper catching slightly as I adjusted it. My father emerged from the study, glass of scotch in hand, the ice clinking as he swirled it. "Evening, Penelope," he greeted, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp, scanning me like a balance sheet. We moved to the living room, his where appetizers waited on a silver tray, tiny quiches and olives speared with toothpicks. I took a seat on the edge of the sofa, crossing my legs, the hem of my dress riding up just a bit, which I tugged down self-consciously. Conversation started light, but it didn't stay that way. My mother poured wine, the bottle glugging as she filled glasses, handing me one with a raised eyebrow. Still driving that old car? She asked, settling into her armchair, her fingers tracing the rim of her own glass. I nodded, taking a sip, the tartness hitting my tongue as I swallowed. It gets me where I need to go. Sophia chimed in, leaning forward, her bracelet jangling. Oh, but you should see the new SUV I just leased. Top of the line with all the bells and whistles. She described it in detail, her hands gesturing animatedly, painting pictures of heated seats and navigation systems, while my parents nodded approvingly, my father's free hand drumming on his knee in rhythm with her enthusiasm. I shifted in my seat, the cushion sinking under me, feeling the spotlight swing away already. That's great, Soph, I said. Genuine but quiet, setting my glass down on the coaster with a careful click to avoid rings on the antique table. But then the questions turned pointed, like arrows notched and released one by one. My father leaned back, crossing his ankles, his polished shoes reflecting the lamplight. So, how's that little job of yours? Still playing savior to the less fortunate? His words carried a chuckle, but it didn't soften the edge, and I felt my jaw clench, teeth grinding subtly as I met his gaze. It's fulfilling, I replied, my voice steady, fingers interlacing in my lap to keep them from fidgeting. We just launched a program for at-risk youth. It's making a real difference. My mother tilted her head, her earrings swaying. How quaint. But does it pay the bills? At your age, you should be thinking about stability, not handouts. She said it with a sympathetic smile, but her eyes flicked to Sophia, who was stifling a smirk behind her wineglass, her lips pursing as she took a sip. I drew in a breath, the air feeling thick, my chest tightening as I uncrossed and recrossed my legs. It does actually, and it's more than money, it's impact. Sophia set her glass down with a deliberate clink, leaning in closer, her elbow on her knee. Come on, Penny, be real, you're 30 now. When are you going to aim higher? Like, I just closed a deal with a major influencer for my PR firm. 6 figures easy. She flipped her hair over her shoulder, the motion fluid and confident, while my parents beamed, my mother reaching out to pat her hand. We're so proud of you, Sophia, that's the Edwards way. Building empires. The words landed heavy, my fingers digging into my thighs through the dress fabric, nails leaving faint crescents, even though I trimmed them short. The barrage continued as we moved to the dining room, the chandelier crystals tinkling softly overhead like mocking laughter. I helped carry plates, my hands steady but knuckles white around the edges, placing them down with measured thuds. At the table, my father carved the roast, the knife slicing through meat with precise strokes, steam rising as he served portions. Penelope, tell us about this boyfriend, he said mid-slice, the word dripping with skepticism, his eyes not leaving the task but his tone probing. I poked at my salad, fork tine scraping the plate, buying a second. Jake's wonderful, kind, smart. My mother interrupted, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, folding it neatly back in her lap. But a plumber, dear? Really? With your background? Her voice was soft, almost pitying, but it stung, making me set my fork down with a clatter that echoed too loudly. Sophia jumped in, buttering her roll, crumbs falling as she tore it. Yeah, I dated a guy like that once, sweet but no future. You deserve better, sis. The sis felt hollow, her eyes gleaming with what looked like amusement as she chewed. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, my foot tapping under the table, heel clicking faintly against the leg. He's more than his job, I said, voice firmer now, hands flat on the tablecloth to steady myself. But they exchanged glances, my father raising an eyebrow, my mother sighing softly, her fingers adjusting her napkin ring. The condescension piled on, each comment a layer. It's just not practical, from Dad. Think of the social circles, from Mom. You're settling, from Sophia, all while they passed dishes, silverware clinking like punctuation to their judgments. By the time the main course was half eaten, my appetite gone, plate barely touched, I was enduring it like a gauntlet, each word a brush that left invisible bruises. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass, the cool condensation slipping under my fingers, grounding me. Inside, anger simmered, thoughts of Jake's secret success flashing like shields, but I held back, biding time. The dinner stretching on with their voices weaving a web of contempt, I navigated one breath at a time. As the main course plates were cleared away, the clatter of silverware against porcelain fading into an uneasy hush, I felt the air in the dining room thicken, charged like the moments before a storm breaks. My mother rang a small bell for the staff, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves, and they swept in silently, removing dishes with practiced efficiency, their footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. I pushed my chair back slightly, the legs scraping just enough to draw eyes, but I needed space, my legs cramped from the tension of sitting still through their barbs. Dessert was served, individual chocolate mousses in crystal glasses topped with gold leaf that shimmered under the chandelier. I stared at mine, spoon untouched, the rich scent turning my stomach as conversation circled back to me, inevitable as gravity. My father cleared his throat, a deep rumble that commanded attention, setting his napkin beside his plate with a precise fold, corners aligned perfectly. "Penelope, we've been patient," he began, his voice measured but edged with finality, leaning forward with elbows on the table, fingers steepled like he was in a boardroom negotiation. My heart stuttered. A quick thud against my ribs, and I met his gaze, my own hands clasping under the table, nails biting into palms to steady the shake. "This plumber situation, it's gone on long enough. We've discussed it as a family." He gestured vaguely to my mother and Sophia, who nodded in unison, my mother's lips pursing as she adjusted her glasses on the chain around her neck, Sophia crossing her arms, her bracelet sliding down her wrist with a soft jingle. I swallowed, throat dry despite the water I'd sipped earlier, the glass now sweating beads that pooled on the coaster. "Discussed what, exactly?" I asked, my voice quieter than intended, but firm enough to cut through the pause. Inside, thoughts raced, Jake's face flashing in my mind, his encouraging nod from earlier that day, his hands squeezing mine before I left. My mother sighed, a dramatic exhale that lifted her shoulders, reaching for her mousse, but only stirring it absent-mindedly, the spoon clinking against the glass. "Your future, dear. We can't support this mismatch. It's embarrassing for all of us." Her words hung heavy, and Sophia leaned in, her eyes narrowing slightly, a micro smirk tugging at her lips as she added, "Yeah, Penny, think about it. Weddings are public. Our friends, the club members, what would they say?" The escalation built slowly at first, like embers catching, but then flared. My father continued, his tone hardening, brows furrowing as he tapped a finger on the tablecloth, leaving faint indentations. "We've decided. If you marry him, you're on your own. No more financial help, no invitations to family events. You'll be cut off." The words landed like a gavel, final and unyielding, and I felt a chill race down my spine, my toes curling in my shoes against the cold floor. "Cut off." It echoed in my head, my mind reeling back to childhood allowances doled out with conditions, always tied to their approval. I blinked rapidly, fighting the blur in my vision, my fingers unclenching to grip the armrests, wood smooth under my tightening hold. Sophia chimed in again, her voice rising in pitch, animated as if this were gossip rather than my life unraveling. "It's for your own good, sis. You're undervaluing yourself? Hanging with someone who fixes toilets? Come on." She scooped a bit of mousse, popping it in her mouth with a satisfied hum, but her eyes stayed on me, probing for weakness. I shifted in my seat, the chair creaking under the movement, heat flushing my neck as anger bubbled up, mixing with the hurt that twisted like a knife. "Jake is the best thing in my life," I said, voice gaining strength, leaning forward to mirror my father's posture, our eyes locking in a silent standoff. "He's kind, intelligent, more than you know. And I love him. We're getting married, with or without you." The room stilled, the only sound the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, each second amplifying the tension. My mother's hand fluttered to her chest, pearls clacking softly as she gasped, "Penelope, how can you say that? After everything we've given you." Her face crumpled in feigned shock, but I saw the calculation in her eyes, the way they darted to my father for backup. He nodded, his jaw set, reaching for his phone on the table as if to underscore the formality, scrolling briefly before setting it down with a decisive tap. "Then it's settled. We won't attend the wedding. We can't endorse this embarrassment. And as of now, consider yourself disowned." Disowned. The words sliced through me, sharper than expected, my breath catching as if punched, my hand pressing against my abdomen to quell the nausea. Tears pricked, hot and unwelcome, but I blinked them back, refusing to let them fall, my chin lifting defiantly as I pushed my untouched dessert away, the glass sliding with a soft scrape. Inside, turmoil raged. Memories of family holidays where I was the afterthought, now culminating in this erasure. Sophia's expression shifted to one of mock sympathy, her head tilting. "Aw, Penny, don't be dramatic. You can still change your mind." But her tone betrayed glee, her foot swinging under the table, brushing mine accidentally, or not, in a subtle prod. I stood abruptly, chair legs thudding back, napkin tumbling to the floor unnoticed. "I won't," I stated, voice steady despite the quake in my knees, hands smoothing my dress to hide the tremble. "If status means more than my happiness, then I don't need you there." They stared, my father frozen mid-reach for his water, glass halfway to his lips, droplets condensing and dripping onto the table. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, a performance I'd seen before, while Sophia's smirk faded into a pout, her arms uncrossing as uncertainty flickered. I turned toward the door, each step deliberate, heels clicking on the hardwood, echoing my resolve. But halfway out I paused, hand on the doorframe, fingers gripping the molding until my knuckles whitened. "One day you'll regret this," I said over my shoulder, voice low but clear, the words hanging like a promise. Their silence followed me as I grabbed my purse from the foyer, strap slung over my shoulder with a sharp tug, and stepped into the night air, cool and freeing against my flushed skin. The drive home blurred, headlights streaking like tears I wouldn't shed, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, steering wheel leather creaking under the pressure. "Disowned?" It repeated in my mind, but beneath the pain, a spark ignited, fueled by Jake's secret, our future. They'd forced my hand, but in doing so handed me the power to reveal everything on my terms. The blur of the drive home sharpened as I turned into our driveway, the headlights sweeping across the garage door like a curtain call on the evening's disaster. I killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the roar in my ears, and sat there, forehead resting on the steering wheel, its leather cool against my skin. Tears I'd held back now slipped free, tracing warm paths down my cheeks, dripping onto my lap where they darkened the navy fabric in small spots. My hands, still gripping the wheel, finally released, fingers aching from the tension, and I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, the material rough against my eyelid. Jake's truck was there, a solid presence, and the porch light flickered on as if sensing my arrival. Motion sensor, but it felt like welcome. I grabbed my purse, the strap catching on the gear shift with a snag that made me yank harder than needed, and stepped out. The night air crisp, carrying the faint scent of neighbor's barbecue. My heels wobbled on the uneven path, each step a reminder of the poise I'd faked all evening, now crumbling. The door opened before I reached it. Jake stood there, silhouetted, his frame filling the entryway, concern etching lines on his forehead as he scanned my face. "Pen," he said simply, stepping aside to let me in, his hand brushing my arm lightly, a question in the touch. I collapsed against him in the foyer. The door clicking shut behind us, my face burying into his chest, inhaling the familiar mix of soap and faint motor oil. His arms encircled me, one hand stroking my back in slow circles, the other cradling my head, fingers threading through my hair gently. We stood like that, my sobs muffled against his shirt, which grew damp under my cheek, until I pulled back, sniffling, my hands framing his face, thumbs tracing his jawline shadowed with stubble. "They disowned me," I whispered, the words tasting bitter, my voice cracking as I met his eyes, searching for the anchor in their steady blue. His expression darkened, brows knitting, but he didn't interrupt, just nodded, his thumbs wiping away fresh tears from my cheeks with tender swipes. "Told me if I marry you, I'm out, no wedding attendance, no nothing." I stepped back, kicking off my heels with sharp flicks that sent them skidding across the tile, and paced the living room, arms hugging myself, the carpet soft under my bare feet. Jake followed, lowering himself onto the couch with a soft thud, elbows on knees, watching me with that patient intensity. "Their loss," he said quietly, but his fists clenched briefly on his thighs, knuckles whitening before relaxing. I stopped pacing, turning to him, my foot twisting into the rug fibers. "We're doing it anyway, the wedding, our way, without them." The decision crystallized in that moment, a spark amid the ache, my chin lifting as I crossed to him, sinking beside him, my hand finding his, interlacing fingers with a squeeze that grounded me. He searched my face, his free hand cupping my cheek, thumb stroking softly. "You sure? We can wait, figure something out." But I shook my head, leaning into his palm, the warmth seeping into my skin. No waiting. They've made their choice. Now we make ours. Time folded into wedding preparations, but the day itself dawned clear, sunlight filtering through our bedroom curtains and golden shafts that danced on the walls. I woke early, heart fluttering like trapped wings, and slipped out of bed, toes curling against the cool hardwood as I padded to the window, parting the fabric to gaze at the yard where we'd set up a simple arch. Jake stirred behind me, sheets rustling as he sat up, hair tousled, reaching for me with a sleepy smile. "Today's the day?" he murmured, voice husky, pulling me back into bed for a moment, his arms wrapping around my waist, lips brushing my shoulder in a light kiss that sent shivers down my spine. The morning blurred into activity, friends arriving, their cars lining the street, doors slamming with cheerful echoes. My best friend Lena bustled in with makeup bags clinking, her hug fierce as she whispered, "You've got this," her hand squeezing my shoulders before guiding me to the vanity. I sat, mirror reflecting my wide eyes, as she applied foundation with gentle dabs, the brush whispering across my skin. "Nervous?" she asked, pausing to meet my gaze in the reflection, her own eyes sparkling. I nodded, fingers twisting a tissue in my lap, shredding it into confetti. "A little, but mostly free." Downstairs, Jake's buddies set up chairs, the metal legs scraping grass as they arranged rows, laughter floating up like music. By afternoon, I stood in our bedroom, dress zipped up the back by Lena's steady hands, the lace hugging my figure, veil pinned with careful tucks. I turned, fabric swishing softly, and caught my breath at the mirror, simple elegance, no ostentation. Jake waited outside as per tradition, but I'd snuck a peek earlier, him in his suit, adjusting his tie with fumbling fingers, a grin breaking through when he caught me watching. Guests milled in the yard. True friends, colleagues from my nonprofit, Jake's team in disguise as plumbing pals, their voices a warm hum, chairs creaking as they settled. No family, the absence a hollow spot, but filled by these faces. Genuine smiles replacing judgmental stares. The ceremony began with the guitarist strumming softly, notes floating on the breeze as I walked the aisle we'd marked with petals, arm linked with Lena's, her grip reassuring. Jake stood under the arch, eyes locking on mine, widening with awe, his hand reaching out as I approached, fingers trembling slightly when they met mine. The officiant, a friend ordained online, cleared his throat, book open in his hands, pages fluttering. "We gather here," he started, voice steady, but my focus was Jake, his vows, spoken low. "Pen, you see me, the real me, and I promise to always see you," his thumb stroking my knuckle during the ring exchange, the band sliding on with a cool weight. I echoed, voice catching, "Jake, you're my home no matter what," tears blurring the crowd as we kissed, his lips soft and sure, hands cupping my face gently amid applause that erupted, hands clapping, some whistling. Reception followed in the yard, tables laden with catered bites, my fork picking at cake, sweetness exploding on my tongue as Jake fed me a piece, his laugh rumbling when frosting smeared my nose, wiped away with his napkin in a tender dab. Friends toasted, glasses clinking, stories shared. Lena recounting our college mishaps, her glass raised high, voice cracking with emotion. As evening fell, lights strung overhead twinkling on, Jake and I danced, his hand on my waist, guiding steps, my head on his shoulder, swaying to a slow song. "Happy?" he whispered, breath warm on my ear. I nodded, pulling back to kiss him, guests cheering faintly in the background. The pain of my family's absence lingered, a dull throb, but here, surrounded by real love, it faded, replaced by joy that bubbled up, my laughter genuine as we spun. No regrets, this was our beginning, pure and untainted. As the last guests trickled out that evening, car doors slamming in the distance like punctuation to our perfect day, Jake and I lingered in the yard, string lights casting a soft glow on the scattered petals and empty chairs. I leaned against him on the porch steps, my veil discarded inside, hair tousled from dancing, his arm around my shoulders, thumb idly tracing patterns on my arm. The air cooled, carrying the scent of cut grass and lingering barbecue from the reception, and I sighed, content but with that undercurrent of unfinished business, the family's absence a ghost at the feast. "What now?" Jake murmured, his voice rumbling through his chest, chin resting on my head. I straightened, pulling out my phone from where I'd tucked it in my dress pocket earlier, the screen lighting up my face in the dimness. "Now we show them what they missed." The idea had brewed during the vows, solidifying over cake and toasts, a single photo, subtle but shattering. I scrolled to the album from the day, fingers swiping across images, us under the arch, rings glinting, friends laughing, but one stood out. Jake had insisted on a work nod in the background, his truck parked visibly, but with a twist. Tucked in the bed, half hidden by a tarp but catchable if you knew to look, was a prototype from his company, a sleek smart device, logo etched faintly, the kind featured in tech mags, and on the tailgate, almost incidental, a sticker from MIT alumni events, peeling at the edges but clear. The photo captured us kissing, joy radiant, with that backdrop telling the real story. No overt brag, just enough for sharp eyes or regretful ones to piece together. I attached it to a group text, Mom, Dad, Sophia, their numbers still in my contacts despite everything, my thumb hovering over send, nail biting into the screen protector. Jake watched, his hand covering mine gently, not pushing, just there. You don't have to, he said, eyes searching mine, brows furrowed slightly in concern. But I shook my head, a small smile tugging my lips, and pressed send, the whoosh sound cutting the night quiet. Message, we did it our way, wishing you could have been there. Simple, no venom, but the photo spoke volumes. I set the phone down on the step with a soft clack, screen facing up, and we waited, his fingers interlacing with mine, squeezing in silent support. Minutes ticked by, the phone silent at first, crickets chirping in rhythm with my pulse. Then it buzzed. Once, twice, a flurry. Sophia first. Wait, is that... Incomplete, dots pulsing as she typed more. My mother's call came next, the ringtone shrill, vibrating the device across the wood. I let it ring, watching the screen light up with her name, my free hand clenching into a fist in my lap. Nails digging crescents into my palm. Voicemail pinged, then Dad's text. Call us, now! Urgency in the caps, no pleasantries. Jake chuckled softly, a low rumble, his shoulder nudging mine. Showtime. I nodded, picking up the phone, fingers steady now, and dialed back on speaker, placing it between us, the cool glass against my thigh. Mom answered mid-ring, voice breathless. Penelope? That photo, what is that in the truck? No hello, straight to it, her words tumbling like she'd been pacing, pearls probably clacking as she gestured. I could picture her in the living room, hand fluttering, Dad's voice overlapped, gruff. Is he? Mighty? And that device? Looks like from that startup everyone's buzzing about. Sophia in the background, muffled but sharp. Zoom in. Yeah, that's the logo. He's the CEO, the anonymous one? The scramble was audible. Rustling papers, maybe pulling up articles on a tablet, keys tapping frantically. I stayed silent at first, letting their realization build, my lips pressing together to suppress a satisfied exhale, Jake's hand warm on my knee, grounding. Finally I spoke, voice calm, measured, like reciting facts. Yes, Jake's an MIT engineer, CEO of a tech company worth millions. He's been just a plumber to stay grounded, but that's his real world. The line went quiet. A stunned pause where I heard breathing, Mom's quick, Dad's heavy, Sophia's a sharp intake. Then the flood. Mom's why didn't you say, laced with hurt but undercut by excitement, her tone shifting to that opportunistic warmth. Dad interjecting, this changes things, we need to meet him properly. Sophia, eager, oh my God, Penny, that's huge, we can host a reception, introduce him to our circles. Their words piled on, scrambling to rewrite the narrative, voices overlapping in a chaotic bid to reclaim space. I felt the hypocrisy rise like bile, my fingers tightening around the phone, knuckles paling. No, I said simply, cutting through their babble, the word landing firm. You rejected him, us, because of a job title. Embarrassed, you called it, disowned me over status. Jake nodded beside me, his expression proud, hand giving mine a gentle pump. Mom stuttered. But we didn't know. I interrupted, voice rising just a notch, edged with the pain they'd inflicted. That's the point, you didn't care to know him as a person. Kind, brilliant Jake, the one who fixed leaks for free in low-income homes, who built a company from nothing. You saw plumber and shut the door. Silence again, thicker, Dad clearing his throat awkwardly, a cough that echoed tinnily. Sophia tried next, voice wheedling. Come on, sis, family forgives, let's celebrate properly now. Her tone grated, that same faux sweetness from dinners past, but I saw through it. Opportunism, not remorse. Forgive? I echoed, a short laugh escaping, bitter but controlled, my free hand gesturing in the air though they couldn't see. You skipped our wedding, cut me off, now because he's worthy in your eyes you want in? That's not love, that's shallow. The words flowed, each one deliberate, my posture straightening on the step, shoulders squaring as if facing them in person. Jake whispered, "Good," his breath warm on my ear, bolstering. Mom's voice cracked, "Penelope, please, we made a mistake." But it rang hollow, her sniffle performative like at the dinner. Dad added, "Think of the family name, this could elevate us all." There it was, the core hypocrisy exposed, my eyes rolling skyward at the stars peeking through. Elevate, that's all you care about, image, connections, not me, not happiness. I paused, letting it sink, the phone's speaker crackling faintly in the quiet. "You've lost the chance to be part of this. Don't contact me unless it's to apologize genuinely, without strings." Their protest started, overlapping pleas. "Wait, let's talk." But I ended the call, thumb pressing the red button with finality, the screen going dark. Exhaling deeply, chest loosening, I set the phone aside, turning to Jake, my head dropping to his shoulder, his arm tightening around me. "Powerful exit," he said softly, kissing my temple, lips lingering. We sat in the afterglow, the yard empty now, just us and the lights, my heart lighter, the hypocrisy rejected not with screams, but calm truth. A door closed on their terms, opened on mine. The days following that phone call blurred into a quiet rhythm, the sting of their scramble fading like echoes in an empty room, but the peace it brought was tentative, tested by small reminders, a missed call notification, a half-written email draft I deleted without sending. Jake and I honeymooned modestly. A cabin in the woods where we'd hike trails hand in hand, his fingers calloused but gentle around mine, leaves crunching under our boots as we talked futures unshadowed by their expectations. Back home, life resumed, my nonprofit work buzzing with new grants, Jake's deal closing with signatures that had him pacing the office, pen clicking nervously before the final stroke. Yet, the real healing came not in isolation, but in connection. A celebration we'd postponed, now ready, with the people who'd shown up, without needing revelation. It was a Saturday evening, the kind where the sun sets golden and slow, painting our backyard in warm hues as friends arrived for what we called our real reception. Lena pulled up first, her car door slamming with enthusiasm, arms laden with covered dishes that wafted garlic and herbs as she hugged me tight on the porch, her cheek pressing against mine. "Finally, the party you deserve," she whispered, pulling back to adjust the strap of her sundress, eyes sparkling with mischief. I laughed, a genuine bubble from my chest, helping her carry the trays inside, our shoulders bumping companionably. The kitchen filled quickly, pots clanging as we uncovered lasagna, salads tossed with wooden spoons scraping bowls, the air thickening with savory scents that chased away any lingering chill from family ghosts. More guests trickled in. My colleague Mark from the nonprofit, his tie loosened already, handing over a bottle of wine with a wink, cork popping later with a festive thud. Jake's team, engineers who'd known his secret all along, arrived in a group, backslaps and laughter echoing as they set up a makeshift bar, bottles clinking on the picnic table, ice rattling in coolers. No stiff formalities here, just easy warmth like slipping into a favorite sweater. I moved among them, hugging, chatting, my dress from the wedding reworked into something casual, hem swaying as I poured drinks, glass edges cool against my palms. "To the happy couple, again," someone toasted early, raising a solo cup, the group cheering with raised arms, voices overlapping in joyful chaos. We gathered in the yard as dusk fell, string lights flickering on like stars we'd strung ourselves, bulbs swaying gently in the breeze. Tables groaned under food, platters passed hand to hand, forks scraping plates, as people settled into lawn chairs that creaked under weight. Lena sat beside me, her plate balanced on her knees, spearing a bite of pasta with enthusiasm. "Remember that fundraiser where we met Jake?" she asked between chews, her free hand gesturing with the fork, sauce dripping slightly onto her napkin. I nodded, smiling at the memory, my own fork pausing midair. The pipe burst, and there he was, hero of the hour. She leaned in, elbow nudging mine, voice dropping conspiratorially. "I knew then. He looked at you like you hung the moon." Her words wrapped around me, soft and affirming, my cheeks warming as I set my plate down to hug her sideways, her hair tickling my nose. Across the circle, Jake held court with his friends, his laugh booming as he recounted a botched prototype demo, hands animating the explosion with wide gestures, fingers splaying. Mark joined in, clapping Jake on the back, the impact thudding audibly. Man, from plumber to CEO, that's the twist we all need in our stories. But it wasn't said with awe at status. It was admiration for the man, the grind, the humility. Jake caught my eye over the group, winking, his smile crinkling his eyes, and I felt a rush, my foot tapping happily against the grass. No one here cared about empires or society pages. They valued the late-night brainstorms, the shared coffees, the real us. As night deepened, music started, someone's playlist through a portable speaker, bass thumping softly, drawing us to dance on the makeshift floor of packed earth. Lena pulled me up first, her hands grabbing mine, swinging me in circles until I was breathless, our laughter mingling with the tune, skirts twirling. Jake cut in smoothly, his arms encircling my waist, pulling me close, our steps syncing effortlessly, his chin brushing my temple. "This is better," he murmured, breath warm on my ear, hands sliding to my hips with a gentle press. I nodded against his chest, inhaling his scent, the fabric of his shirt soft under my cheek. Friends whooped around us, joining in pairs or groups, feet shuffling, occasional stumbles met with good-natured ribs. The contrast hit me then, vivid as a split screen. The toxic family dinner, with its polished silver and cutting words, plates barely touched amid judgments, versus this, messy and alive, with plastic cups spilling laughs, genuine toasts that lifted rather than lacerated. There, I'd twisted napkins in anxiety, words guarded. Here I spoke freely, sharing wedding anecdotes, my hands gesturing animatedly, no fear of dismissal. Sophia's smirks replaced by Lena's encouraging nods, her head tilting as she listened, fingers drumming thoughtfully on her cup. My parents' steepled fingers and decrees giving way to Mark's open palms in animated debate, no hierarchies, just equal. A quiet moment came later, the group thinning as some headed home, hugs exchanged at the gate, back pats and promises to catch up. Jake and I sat with the core few, Lena, Mark, a couple of Jake's engineers around a fire pit we'd lit, flames crackling, sparks dancing upward. Marshmallows toasted on sticks, gooey and charred, passed around with sticky fingers. "You know," Mark said, wiping his hands on his jeans, the denim rasping, "family isn't blood, it's this, who shows up, who sees you." His words landed soft, eyes meeting mine across the fire, flickering light playing on his face. I poked at the embers with a stick, wood popping, sending a shower of sparks. "Yeah," I agreed, voice thick, glancing at Jake, who squeezed my knee, thumbs circling reassuringly. Lena added, leaning forward, elbows on knees, "Your folks missed out, not just on the wedding, but on you. We're lucky to have you." No pity in her tone, just fact, her hand reaching to pat my arm, a quick, warm touch. The group murmured agreement, heads nodding, and I felt tears prick, not from hurt but gratitude, blinking them back as I raised my cup. "To chosen family," I toasted, voice steady, cups clinking in a circle, plastic crumpling slightly under the taps. We talked late, stories flowing, laughter punctuating the night, my body relaxing into the chair, muscles uncoiling from tensions I hadn't realized lingered. As the fire died to glowing coals, Jake and I walked the last guests out, arms linked, our steps synchronized on the path. Back inside, door clicking shut, he pulled me close in the hallway, forehead to forehead, noses brushing. "See? This is us," he said, hands framing my face, thumbs stroking cheeks. I kissed him, slow and deep, the evening's warmth sealing the contrast. Cold rejection thawed by authentic embrace, a new foundation built not on blood, but bonds that valued the real me. The warmth from that evening lingered like a soft blanket as Jake and I climbed the stairs to bed, our footsteps creaking on the wooden treads in unison, his hand trailing lightly along my back, fingers brushing the zipper of my dress. We changed in comfortable silence, me slipping into pajamas, the cotton cool against my skin as I folded the dress over a chair, him kicking off shoes with soft thuds, socks peeled off and tossed into the hamper. Under the covers, he pulled me close, our legs tangling, his breath steady on my neck, but sleep came slow. My mind replaying the scramble in my family's voices from days before, their texts still unread on my phone downstairs, screen likely dotted with notifications like insistent knocks. Morning light filtered through the blinds, slats casting striped shadows on the walls, and I woke to the smell of coffee brewing. The machine gurgling from the kitchen. Jake was already up, as usual, and I patted down, barefoot on the cold tile, wrapping my robe tighter around me, belt tying in a loose knot. He handed me a mug, steam rising in curls, his kiss on my forehead lingering a second longer than usual. "Mails came," he said casually, nodding to the counter where envelopes lay scattered, but one stood out, thick cream paper, my mother's handwriting elegant on the front. My fingers hesitated over it, tracing the seal, a wax stamp with the family crest that always felt pretentious. I set my mug down with a clink, the porcelain ringing softly, and slid it open, paper tearing with a satisfying rip. Inside a letter, formal, typed on letterhead but signed in ink by all three. Mom's flourish, Dad's bold stroke, Sophia's looped cursive. Words of reconciliation, misunderstandings, invitations to dinner, to properly welcome Jake. My jaw tightened, teeth clenching as I read, hand crumpling the edge slightly. Jake leaned over my shoulder, his chin brushing my hair, reading silently before straightening, arms crossing over his chest, muscles tensing under his t-shirt. "They're trying," he said neutrally, but his tone held caution, fingers drumming lightly on the counter. I shook my head, folding the letter with sharp creases, each fold deliberate, like sealing away their attempt. Trying on their terms, again. The aftermath had been a barrage, texts escalating from pleas to demands, voicemails I deleted mid-sentence, their voices tinny through the speaker. But this letter felt like the pivot, forcing me to decide. Engage or fortify? I paced the kitchen, mug forgotten, cooling on the counter, my slippers scuffing the floor in short bursts. Jake watched, leaning against the fridge, door handle cool under his palm as he waited. "What do you want?" he asked finally, voice low, stepping forward to still my movement with hands on my arms, thumbs rubbing soothing circles. I met his eyes, the blue steady, and exhaled, shoulders dropping. Boundaries. Real ones. If they want back in, it's my rules, no more games. We talked it through over breakfast, toast crunching under knives as we spread jam, plates clattering softly on the table. I drafted a response in my head, words forming like bricks for a wall, each one solid. By mid-morning, phone in hand, screen unlocking with a swipe, I composed an email. Better than a call, no interruptions, my fingers tapping keys with measured clicks. "I appreciate the letter," I started, neutral but firm. "But actions speak louder. You've shown where your values lie, status over substance. If you want to rebuild, it starts with accountability." I listed the rules. No unsolicited advice on our lives, respect for Jake's choices, including his privacy, apologies in person, sincere without excuses, and limited contact. Monthly calls at first, no drop-ins, no leveraging connections for their gain. Each sentence built the fortress, my posture straightening as I typed, back pressing against the chair. Jake read over my shoulder again, nodding approval, his hand squeezing my shoulder, fingers kneading tension away. "Send it," he encouraged, and I did. The whoosh of the email a release, like exhaling a held breath. The wait was short, replies pinged in hours later. Mom's first, agreeing hastily, emojis of hearts that felt forced. Dad's curt acceptance, scheduling a meet. Sophia's flippant, "Fine, whatever," but with a date suggestion. They proposed coffee at a neutral spot, a cafe downtown, public enough for civility. I agreed, but on my timeline, next week, short meeting, Jake optional. He opted out, kissing me goodbye that day with "You've got this," his lips firm on mine, hand lingering on my cheek. The cafe buzzed with midday chatter, espresso machines hissing steam, chairs scraping as patrons shifted. I arrived early, claiming a corner table, fingers drumming on the wood, napkin twisted in my lap. They entered together, Mom in her tailored coat, pearls peeking, Dad with briefcase, like it was business, Sophia scrolling her phone, heels clicking sharply. Spotting me, Mom waved, a tentative smile, but I stayed seated, nodding them over, my coffee cup warm in my hands, steam curling up. They sat, chairs pulling out with squeaks, coats draped over backs. "Penelope," Mom started, voice soft, reaching across but stopping short when I didn't reciprocate, her hand retreating to fiddle with her saucer. We ordered lattes for them, refills clinking as the waiter poured, then dove in. "We're sorry," Dad said gruffly, stirring sugar with a spoon that tinkled against the cup, avoiding my eyes at first, then meeting them squarely. "We were wrong about Jake, about you." Sophia nodded, setting her phone face down with a tap, her fingers interlacing. "Yeah, I get it now. We were shallow." But her tone held a edge, eyes flicking away, foot tapping under the table, brushing the leg audibly. I listened, sipping slowly, the bitterness matching my caution, setting the cup down with a deliberate clink. "Words are a start," I replied, voice even, leaning forward slightly, elbows on the table. But prove it, follow the boundaries, no pushing, no judgments. They probed gently at first, questions about the wedding, Jake's company, but I redirected, hand raising palm out, a subtle stop. Not today. This is about acknowledgement. Mom's eyes welled, a tissue dabbing corners, her sniff quiet. We missed so much, she whispered, but I held firm, no softening. Dad shifted, clearing his throat, a rumble. We'll respect that. Sophia rolled her eyes briefly, caught herself, smoothing her skirt with flattened palms. The conversation stretched, tense but contained. My rules reiterated. Calls scheduled, no surprises. Focus on neutral topics, build trust slow. They agreed verbally, nods sinking, but I watched microsigns. Dad's jaw twitch, Sophia's fidgeting ring twist, Mom's forced smile. Leaving, hugs awkward. Mom's lingering, Dad's pat on the back stiff, Sophia's quick squeeze. I walked out first, doorbell jingling, fresh air hitting like freedom. In the car, hands on the wheel, leather creaking under grip, I felt the fortress solid, boundaries not walls to trap but gates I controlled. Texts followed, confirmations, tentative plans, but I responded sparingly, enforcing the space. Home, Jake waited, dinner simmering, his hug enveloping as I recounted, his nods affirming. That night, in bed, his arm over me, I realized the power, not revenge but reclamation. My rules reshaping the engagement on terms that protected the life we'd built, with the boundaries firmly in place like invisible fences that hummed with quiet power. I turned my focus inward, not to lick wounds, but to build something lasting, something that would etch my version of the Edwards name into the world. It started small, a seed planted during those post-wedding weeks when Jake's deal finally closed, flooding our accounts with resources we'd only dreamed of. But instead of splurging on the trappings my family worshipped, yachts or galas, we channeled it into impact. My nonprofit had always been my passion, a quiet rebellion against their real estate empires built on exclusion, but now, with Jake's backing, I could amplify. The turning point came one crisp autumn morning, as I sat at my desk in the small office downtown, surrounded by stacks of grant proposals yellowing at the edges, and decided to launch the Edwards Equity Fund, a program to provide tech education and startup grants to underserved communities, redefining what our family name stood for. The office was humble, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting a steady glow on the corkboard pinned with success stories. Kids from low-income neighborhoods who'd landed internships, single moms starting businesses. I sipped my coffee, the mug warm in my hands, steam fogging my glasses as I sketched the fund's outline on a notepad, pen scratching across the paper in hurried loops. Jake had offered his company's resources, mentors, software, even space in his expanding headquarters, but this was mine to shape. Make it yours, he'd said the night before, over dinner, his fork pausing mid-bite, eyes locked on mine across the table cluttered with takeout containers. I'd nodded, my hand reaching for his, fingers squeezing in agreement, the ring on my finger catching the kitchen light. That morning, I dove in, fingers flying over the keyboard, typing up the proposal with clicks that echoed in the empty room. The fund would bear the Edwards name, not to honor my parents' legacy of gated communities and elite deals, but to subvert it. Scholarships for coding boot camps, microloans for tech entrepreneurs from marginalized backgrounds, partnerships with local schools to install smart labs. Each element was deliberate, a counterpoint to the shallow values I'd grown up with. I paused midway, leaning back in my chair, the springs creaking under the shift, and stared at the screen, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Doubt crept in. Would this really reclaim anything, or just be another drop in the ocean? My fingers drummed on the desk, nails tapping wood, but then I thought of Sophia's galas, fundraising for vanity causes, and my resolve hardened, shoulders squaring as I continued typing. By noon, the draft was solid, pages printing with a rhythmic whir from the old machine in the corner, paper stacking warmly in the tray. I gathered them, staples clicking into place, the sharp sound punctuating my determination. Calling a meeting with my team felt like the next step, real action, not just plans. They filed into the conference room, a cramped space with a wobbly table and mismatched chairs that scraped the linoleum as they sat. There was Carla, my right hand, coffee in hand, her notebook open, pen poised, Raj, the program coordinator, adjusting his glasses with a habitual push, and a few interns, wide-eyed, phones silenced with quick taps. I stood at the head, papers distributed with soft thuds on the table, and cleared my throat, voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. Team, I've been thinking about legacy, I began, hands clasping the back of a chair, fingers gripping the vinyl until it dimpled. The Edwards name has always meant wealth, status, but to me it's a chance to do better. With new funding from my husband's company, we're launching the Edwards Equity Fund. I outlined it, point by point, pacing slowly, heels clicking softly, gesturing to the projections on the flip chart I'd scribbled earlier, marker squeaking as I circled key figures. Carla nodded vigorously, her pen jotting notes with quick scratches, eyes lighting up. This could change lives, she said, leaning forward, elbow on the table, her bracelet sliding down her wrist. Raj chimed in, pushing his glasses up again. Integrating Jake's tech smart home kits for training? Brilliant. The interns murmured agreement, one fidgeting with a pen cap, clicking it open and closed in excitement. But the deeper dive came in the questions, turning the meeting into a forge where ideas hammered into shape. Carla challenged the scope, her voice rising slightly, hand-waving the proposal. How do we ensure diversity in applicants, not just urban, rural too? I paused, absorbing, then nodded, pulling a chair out with a scrape and sitting, leaning in. Good point. We'll partner with community centers nationwide, targeted outreach. Raj added logistics, his fingers tracing lines on his copy, paper crinkling. Budget for mentors? Jake's team could volunteer, but we need stipends for sustainability. Discussions flowed, voices overlapping in passionate bursts, my own interjecting to guide, hand raising to pause, then lowering to invite more. An intern suggested social media campaigns, her phone pulled out to show examples, screen swiping under her thumb, and we brainstormed hashtags, my notepad filling with scrawls. The energy built, transforming doubt into drive. By the end, the room hummed with purpose, chairs pushing back with collective resolve. Hugs and high fives followed, Carla's embrace tight, her pat on my back firm, Raj's handshake warm, lingering a second. Alone after, stacking chairs with metallic clangs, I felt the weight of reclamation. Not abstract, but tangible, in the plans clutched under my arm, edges curling slightly from handling. This fund wasn't revenge, it was redirection, using the resources Jake and I had to uplift, countering my family's exclusionary empires with inclusive opportunities. The Edwards name, once a chain, now a bridge I'd built. Evening brought reflection. Jake met me at the door, takeout bags rustling in his hands, aromas of Thai curry wafting. Over dinner, cross-legged on the couch, forks digging into noodles that steamed and twirled, I shared the day's triumph. It's happening, I said, setting my container down with a soft thud, leaning back into cushions. He listened, nodding, his hand on my knee, thumbs circling. You're rewriting it all, he replied, pride in his eyes pulling me close, our foreheads touching. In that moment the legacy felt mine, positive, impactful, on terms that honored the overlooked, just as I'd been. No more shadows, just light. I'd kindled myself. The launch of the Edwards Equity Fund marked a turning point, but the true culmination came months later, on a quiet evening alone in my home office, where the weight of everything settled into a profound internal realization that shifted my world irrevocably. The room was dimly lit by a desk lamp, its warm bulb casting long shadows across the cluttered surface. Stacks of reports from the fund's first cohort, printed emails from grateful recipients, and a framed photo of Jake and me on our wedding day, smiles genuine amid the backyard setup. I'd spent the day reviewing applications, my eyes scanning screens until they blurred, fingers scrolling through stories of aspiring coders from forgotten neighborhoods, each one a mirror to my own overlooked struggles. Now, as the clock ticked past midnight, the house silent except for the faint hum of the fridge downstairs, I pushed back from the desk, chair wheels rolling softly on the hardwood, and stood stretching my arms overhead, vertebrae popping in release. I wandered to the window, parting the curtains with a gentle tug, fabric whispering against the rod, and gazed out at the night sky, stars pinpricking the darkness like distant promises. My reflection stared back from the glass, lines around my eyes from years of squinting at doubts, but a softness now, a quiet strength in the set of my jaw. The realization didn't crash like a wave, it built slowly, layer by layer, as I traced my journey in my mind, hands pressing against the cool sill, fingers splaying on the wood. It started with the family's rejection, that dinner where their words had sliced deep, leaving scars I'd bandaged with defiance. I'd built walls, then bridges on my terms, but tonight, alone with my thoughts, I understood. My worth wasn't in their approval, or even in the fun's success. It was internal. A flame I'd tended myself, flickering steady regardless of external winds. Memories surfaced unbidden, vivid as if replayed on a screen. Childhood moments like the time I'd won a school award for a community project, certificate clutched in small hands, only for my parents to glance over it, their praise reserved for Sophia's dance recital trophy, shining on the mantel. I'd internalized that, felt lesser, chased validation like a shadow. My fingers tightened on the sill, nails scraping faintly as I recalled the wedding, their empty seats a void, but filled by chosen love that warmed deeper. And the revelation photo, their scramble a temporary high but hollow because it hadn't changed me. It exposed them. Even the boundaries, enforced with steady emails and measured calls, were tools for protection, not punishment. Jake's support, constant as his morning coffee ritual, mug steaming as he'd hand it over with a kiss, had been a mirror, reflecting back the value I now saw clearly. I turned from the window, pacing the room slowly, footsteps muffled on the rug, arms hugging myself against a chill that wasn't from the air. The fund's impact reports lay open, one catching my eye, a young woman's testimonial, her words thanking the program for a chance she'd never had, her startup now thriving. It echoed my path. Undervalued, but resilient. My hand hovered over the page, tracing the printed lines with a fingertip, the paper smooth and slightly warm from the lamp. This wasn't about flipping the script on my family. It was about authoring my own. Their shallow values, status as currency, love conditional, had pushed me here, but the peace came from releasing the need for their reckoning. They might never fully change. Mom's calls still laced with subtle probes, Dad's apologies gruff and incomplete, Sophia's texts sporadic and self-centered. But that was their burden now, not mine. Sitting back at the desk, the chair creaking under my weight, I pulled out a journal from the drawer, pages rustling as I flipped to a blank one, pen cap clicking off with my thumb. I wrote, ink flowing in steady strokes. I am enough, not because of achievements or revelations, but because I choose to be. The words stared back, simple yet profound, my handwriting looping with emotion. Tears welled, not from sadness but release, one dropping onto the page, blurring the ink slightly, a soft smudge I didn't wipe away. I closed the journal with a soft thud, setting it aside, and leaned back, eyes closing, breathing deep, chest rising and falling in rhythm. The internal storm had quieted, no more chasing echoes of approval. Self-validation was the anchor, rooted in my choices, my love with Jake, my work that lifted others as it had lifted me. Jake stirred downstairs, his footsteps approaching, door opening with a gentle creak. "Still up?" he asked softly, leaning in the frame, hair tousled from bed, his presence a comfort. I smiled, standing to meet him, arms wrapping around his waist, head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and true. "Just thinking," I murmured, pulling back to kiss him lightly, lips brushing his. He didn't press, just nodded, hand stroking my back in slow circles, understanding the quiet. We headed to bed together, lights clicking off behind us, the house settling into peace. Lying there, his arm over me, I felt it fully, the worth that bloomed internal, untouchable by prejudice or past. No more undervalued. I was whole, on my terms, the journey's end not in revenge, but in this serene self-embrace. The journey from feeling perpetually undervalued to embracing my true worth wasn't just about the dramatic reveal or the boundaries I set. It was about discovering that real validation comes from within. Have you ever had to confront shallow judgments in your own life, whether from family or society? Maybe you've chosen love over status, or built something meaningful despite the doubters. I realized that my parents' prejudice didn't define me. It pushed me to redefine success on my terms, creating the Edwards Equity Fund to uplift others who feel invisible. Jake and I are thriving now, surrounded by genuine connections, and I've found peace in knowing my value isn't tied to their approval. It's empowering to flip the script, not for revenge, but for self-growth. So, what do you think? Did I set boundaries strong enough? Or should I have gone further? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or a similar story from your life. It could help someone else going through this. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more inspiring tales of reclaiming your worth. Your engagement means the world. Let's build a community where everyone feels seen and valued.